Hey everyone. I want to share some insights on how to do well on your technical interviews. And I want to share a bunch of notes that I think are different than a lot of the other videos. If you just go on YouTube, you'll find a lot of videos on how to actually do one of these technical interviews, like reading the question, clarifying the question, asking clarifying questions, getting to a brute force solution, different things like that. But I'm just going to give you a deeper look at how these technical interviews are actually ran and what I'm looking at as somebody who does a lot of these interviews and conducts a lot of these interviews. And now at my current company, I'm even training people up to do these interviews. I'll tell you things I'm thinking about and how to succeed at these interviews. So, this is specifically technical interviews. I don't really do any of the behavioral interviews, but you pretty much need to pass these technical interviews in order to get a job. If you fail the technical interviews as a software engineer, no matter how good you are at talking, how good you are at communicating, unless it's like a super senior role, but there's low chance that you will get an offer if you completely do bad in a technical interview. So make sure that you are well studied and have you watched this video from start to finish essentially. So a little bit about me is I've been interviewing candidates for the last 4 years, starting at literally 4 years since it's been 4 years since I started interviewing candidates. I've conducted probably over 100 technical interviews myself. I've also been interviewing myself, so I've done probably over 35 technical interviews myself. And at my current company, I'm actually training interviewers so that they could get ramped up on the questions and be able to conduct interviews for themselves. So I have a lot of experience in these technical interviews, but a lot of these technical interviews are specific to FAANG companies and startups in the Bay Area. So just understand that when you're taking in all the stuff that I say. But pretty much, I feel like if you can do well in these interviews, you can do pretty well in other interviews. I've interviewed in places in Canada and tons of other jobs, and if you could do well in these Bay Area startups or FAANG companies, you could probably do well in those other interviews as well. So the first thing that I would like to talk about is from the engineer perspective. Pretend I'm the engineer that's interviewing you. Everything is pretty streamlined. I literally just get a calendar invite with a link to whatever CoderPad or hacker rank link, whatever, in on my calendar, and I just pretty much, when the time comes to the interview, I just join the Zoom link. I join the CoderPad, and then I just start asking you a question. There's not much prep that I do before and after. I pretty much just hop in and start assessing you essentially. And that's because engineering hours are expensive. They want to streamline everything as possible and then fit it in within the engineers calendars so that they don't have to put away pushing product features, fixing bugs and things like that. So pretty much it's pretty streamlined. I just get a link and then I just join the link, and I already know what question I'm going to ask you. A lot of times they tell you exactly what question that they're going to ask you. And a lot of times the applicant tracking system is the one that's randomizing the question and figuring out the one question that we're going to ask you. And even a lot of times depending what questions you already did or what questions are better for the role you're interviewing for, a recruiter or somebody will let me know before, and they'll just pretty much add that to my Zoom link. But essentially I hop in and then I conduct the interview and I type in my feedback, and I don't really have to think about it until maybe you pass the interview and I have to go to the panel and then just talk about your performance. But probably 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 people pass interviews. So a lot of times you just type in feedback and don't think about it, and then maybe at some point there will be a debrief where you get a link to a Zoom, and then you have to provide the feedback that you got on that specific person. So at all the companies that I've ever worked at, and also all my friends have worked at, this is pretty standard. But when I conduct an interview, by the end I'm gonna have a score between 1 to 4, and it could only be 1, 2, 3, or 4. Essentially, 1 is a strong no, right? 2 is a no, 3 is a higher, and 4 is a strong higher. Pretty much everyone who's going to be interviewing you is going to give you a score from 1 to 4. And usually you need more, like 3 or more, um, across all the interviews. If you get like maybe a 2 in one of them, or maybe a couple twos, maybe there we'll talk like in the debrief we'll talk more about like the different negative and positive signals specifically, like different things related to your actual interview that might sway you to a hire. But if this role is really critical and we just have a ton of candidates in the pipeline, even a hire won't probably get you the job. So, yeah, usually by the end of the interview, I'm just gonna have a score from 1 to 4. I I don't remember the last time I ever gave a strong no. And strong hires, they try to tell you to reserve those unless they really you really blow it out the park. That means you go into the interview, you clarify all the questions, you have all the edge cases, you write out the code almost perfectly, you pass all the parts of the question. At the end, you write unit tests to cover your code, and you just speak about your approach like well. I think that's a strong hire, and probably just a little less than that will get you a strong hire. But most of the time, I'm giving hires, and then a lot of times I'm actually just giving no if they can't solve the question. Cool. So another thing is I'm not looking at your resume at all when I interview you. I do not care what you've done before. I don't care what school you went to. I don't care pretty much about any of that because my job as an interviewer is to assess your technical skills. And I try not to introduce any bias as possible. Like if I know you went to the same school as me, I mean, that might make me be nicer to you, but like I hope not, but that's still a bias that can be introduced. So honestly, I don't even care about your background. I will ask you at the start of the interview a little bit about your background just to get to know you a bit and just so we have that data. But it for me, like I'm not paying attention to it because my job is to assess the technical skills, your technical skills, and other people like the recruiters, the engineering managers and stuff like that are actually getting to the behavioral and actually understanding your resume. A lot of times, if you come to me and you're being interviewed by me, you've already like your resume is already good for the job essentially. Cool. That's a little bit of stuff like before the interview. One thing I would like to also say is like we want you to succeed in these interviews. I don't know why people say that we don't want them to succeed in the interviews, but we want you to succeed because like as an interviewer, it's pretty draining when someone can't solve the question, and it's even more draining for the interviewee. So we want you to succeed. I'm on your side to help you like get to the solution. You should ask me as much questions as you want, clarify as much things as you want. I might give a few hints or two, but we want you to succeed. Probably a hot take is like if you get too many hints, in a lot of companies, too many hints will actually make you fail the interview because if you are able to pass the question, then we'll be wondering like would they have been able to solve it if we didn't tell them exactly what to do? So try to solve it with no hints. And if you are to get a hint, try to make it so that it don't give you that big of a hint. So yeah, we want you to succeed contrary to popular belief. Next, in all the companies that I've ever interviewed at, getting working code is almost required to pass. Like if your code does not work, it does not run. Most of the companies I've interviewed for made me run the code. Um, like you won't get the job. So get working code. Pretty much, even ask me like, especially if they never did technical interviews, like asking me if like we care about soft skills, how we assess soft skills, and we don't really assess soft skills in a technical interview. That's for the behavioral interview. I'll actually be assessing your soft skills by how you clarify questions, how you propose different alternate solutions, how you talk about your approach, um, how you handle suggestions. If I give you a suggestion and you like get offended or something like that, like that's like a negative signal on your soft skills. So I'll assess your soft skills, yes, but by watching how you like solve the question and communicate and things like that. Those are the soft skills I care about from the technical perspective. There's other soft skills and stuff, but in a technical interview, literally just focus on getting working code and making sure the interviewer understands what you're trying to do. And yeah, like one thing is like no matter how smart you are, just talk about your approach. I've seen smart people just hop on and just start writing stuff, but like I'll just assume you're using GPT if you just start writing code because candidates are using that these days. We've caught a few candidates just straight up catching GPT or using GPT because they just start writing the answer and then we'll be like, okay, explain it a little bit and it will just fall short. What else? I guess when you're given a like problem, don't over optimize right away. And especially when you're looking for the optimal solution, look at all the constraints of the problem and use it to your advantage. A lot of the times have to read the question really well because the constraints of the question will help you solve that particular problem. Like usually you'll be given like a problem and in the if you had to implement that problem in the most general way possible, you just would never finish it during that interview. But if you follow the constraints and look at like the limitations, because every real world problem has constraints. Yeah, make sure you don't over optimize and look at the constraints. If you need to get a like brute force working, that's fine. But honestly, in most of these interviews, like it's just a waste of time to do the brute force because honestly, brute force is not going to get you the job. A lot of times, brute force will definitely not get you a job. So only do the brute force if you're completely stuck or it kind of works you through the solution. But most of the people that I've seen past interviews, literally, they might think of the brute force, but they'll know it's a brute force right away, and they'll quickly try to iterate to something that's not brute force unless like you tell them otherwise. What else? So, in most of my interviews, like I said, you need working code that actually works, and like you need to be able to on the fly draft up test cases and run those test cases on on your code, and then look at the output of the editor and make sure that the output is correct. So, like when you're studying lead code, study some questions like away from the lead code editor and just open up VS Code or something and write your solutions and then also write test cases for them. So make sure you practice that muscle. What else? Pretty much strong hires, like I mentioned, they uncover all edge cases to the problem and their code will automatically handle them. And they're just like they're few and far between, but like if you want to get a strong hire, read the question really well, understand all of the different constraints, and then get to the optimal algorithm and implement that optimal algorithm. Like it's a lot to ask for, but with enough studying of lead code or enough studying of algorithms or just like the more you just like improve on your craft as a software engineer, you'll be able to get that at some point. Trust me, it's not actually as hard as everyone on the internet makes it seem. It's all possible with just like consistently trying to get better. And then finally, like if you have to go into the interview and you have to look way too many things up, that will hurt your performance on the interview. So for example, I have to look up at a filter, then I have to look at the sort and how to do sort based on a specific key. If I need to look at sort and figure out how to do a reverse sort. If I need to look up all those things, like maybe one or two things to look up isn't bad, but if you just do it too much, then I'll just assume you don't really know the language. And usually we want candidates to come in and use a language they already know. So make sure you know your language and just all this just boils down to practice. So that's kind of my deep dive into technical interviews and how to do well, coming from someone who actually conducts these interviews and trains people up into these interviews. I hope y'all learned something about it and good luck on your interviews. one thing too is like you should start studying if you're looking for summer jobs. You should start studying for lead code probably now and starting to apply right now. Because these processes are usually like 1 to 3 months. So starting January, you pretty much have January, February, March to like it just cut like if you want to start working in April or late April or early May, like applying in January sometimes is too late. So please start applying now, start studying lead code now if you're looking for a job 5 months ahead or 5 months in the future. So, all right, see y'all in the next video.